What if I told you that Valentine's Day was born in a time when love was illegal, when saying, "I want to marry you," could destroy your life? Today, we see red hearts, chocolate boxes, roses, and smiling couples on February 14th, but we almost never stop to ask one simple question: why this day and why love? The truth begins almost 1,800 years ago, inside the powerful and dangerous Roman Empire. Imagine living in the 3rd century, around 250 AD. Rome controls huge lands across Europe, North Africa, and parts of Asia. It is rich, organized, and feared, but it is also tired. There are wars at the borders. Enemies are attacking. Inside the empire, there are political problems and rebellions. Soldiers are dying far from home. The emperor at that time, Claudius II, believes that Rome needs stronger armies. He thinks deeply about why some men do not want to fight bravely. And then he creates a shocking idea. He decides that love is the problem. In his mind, married men are weaker. They miss their wives. They think about their children. They dream about returning home alive instead of dying as heroes. Claudius wants soldiers who care only about victory. So he makes a cruel decision. He bans marriage for young men who could become soldiers. No weddings, no official families, no promises for the future. If you want to serve Rome, you must give up love. Imagine being a young man in Rome. You fall in love with a woman. You want to build a home, to have children, to grow old together. But the government says no. Your feelings are now against the law. If you marry, you are a criminal. Couples begin to meet in secret. They whisper their dreams at night. They are afraid of soldiers listening outside the door. The city becomes quieter. There are fewer celebrations, fewer songs, fewer wedding feasts. Love does not disappear, but it hides. People feel something is wrong. Something is broken inside their world. And in the middle of this fear, there is one man who refuses to accept that love is a crime. His name is Valentine. He is not a general. He is not rich. He is not powerful in politics. He is a Christian priest in Rome at a time when Christianity itself is not fully accepted. Even practicing his faith is risky. But Valentine believes in something stronger than fear. He believes that marriage is sacred, that when two people truly love each other, their union is not just a social contract but a holy promise. When he hears about the emperor's order, he feels pain for the young couples of Rome. He sees their tears, he hears their silence, and he makes a decision that will change history. One evening, a young couple comes to him secretly. Their voices shake as they speak. They love each other, but they cannot marry because of the law. They ask him for help. Valentine looks at them not as rebels, not as criminals, but as two human hearts asking for hope. He knows the danger. If he is discovered, he could be arrested or killed. But he also knows that doing nothing would mean accepting fear as the ruler of people's lives. That night, by the soft light of candles in a quiet corner of his church, Valentine performs a secret wedding. There are no guests, no music, no big celebration, only whispers, promises, and faith. In that small moment, love wins against the empire. Word slowly spreads through Rome. Lovers talk in quiet voices. There is a priest who will help you. There is a man who believes your love matters. Couples begin knocking on his door at night. He marries them in hidden gardens, in small rooms, even in places far from the city center. Each ceremony is simple but full of meaning. Valentine understands that every time he says the marriage words, he is breaking the emperor's law. But he believes he is following a higher law. The risk grows larger every day. Roman soldiers begin to hear rumors. Officials receive reports about illegal weddings. The city feels tense. Valentine knows that secrets cannot stay hidden forever, yet he continues. Why? Because for him, love is not just a feeling. It is a truth worth protecting. What if the most famous love letter in history was written by a man waiting to die? Valentine was taken back to his prison cell, and the heavy door closed behind him with a cold metallic sound. But this was not the end of his influence. It was the beginning of a different kind of story, one that would travel through centuries. The prison was dark and damp. The air smelled of stone and iron, and only a small window high in the wall allowed a thin line of sunlight to enter for a short time each day. Valentine no longer had his small church, no young couples knocking at night, no whispered wedding promises, no candlelight ceremonies, only chains on the wall and the quiet sound of his own breathing. Yet something about him remained unbroken. The other prisoners watched him carefully. They expected anger. They expected fear. They expected a man destroyed by injustice. But Valentine did not curse the Emperor Claudius II. He did not shout. He did not beg for freedom. Instead, he prayed softly. He spoke kindly to the guards. He shared words of hope with men who had already lost hope. It was as if the prison walls were weaker than his faith. The officer responsible for the prison, often remembered in legend as Asterius, had heard the rumors. This was not a thief, not a murderer. This was the priest who had secretly married lovers across Rome. Curious and cautious, the jailer decided to speak with him. Their first conversation was formal, but it did not stay that way. They talked about power and law, about the emperor's decision, about whether love makes a man weak or strong. Valentine explained that love does not take strength away. It gives strength meaning. The jailer listened. He had seen soldiers cry for their families before battle. He had seen fear in strong men's eyes. Slowly, respect replaced suspicion. The jailer had a daughter, young and intelligent, but blind since birth. She had never seen the color of the sky above Rome, never seen her father's face, never seen a flower or a flame. When the jailer spoke about her, his voice changed. He asked Valentine a difficult question. If your God is truly powerful, can he help my daughter? It was not only a father's hope, it was also a challenge. One afternoon, the girl was guided into the prison. Her steps were careful, her hands slightly extended to feel the space around her. Imagine her standing inside a cold cell, chains on the walls, light falling softly from the small window. Valentine greeted her gently. Instead of beginning with a miracle, he began with words. He described the world she had never seen. He told her about the deep blue of the Mediterranean Sea, about golden sunlight at sunrise, about the red petals of a rose. He explained what stars look like at night and how the moon shines over Rome. Through his voice, she began to build pictures inside her mind. She returned many times. They spoke about faith, about kindness, about courage. She asked questions about the world, and he answered patiently. A bond grew between them, not romantic, but profound and human, built on trust and compassion. The jailer observed these meetings and saw something unexpected. His daughter smiling more, speaking with confidence, imagining a world beyond darkness. One day, moved by a father's desperation and a priest's compassion, Valentine offered to pray for her. There was no audience, no dramatic performance, only a quiet moment inside stone walls. He placed his hands gently over her eyes and whispered a simple prayer. According to the legend that survived through generations, something changed in that instant. The girl felt warmth, then brightness. At first, she saw only light, unclear and overwhelming. Slowly, shapes appeared, then colors, the outline of her father's face, the gray of the prison walls, the thin golden line of sunlight from the window. Imagine the shock, the tears, the silence breaking into cries of joy. Whether miracle or powerful story shaped by time, this moment became part of history. But even this did not cancel the emperor's command. How does a man walk calmly toward death and unknowingly create a tradition that will live longer than empires? The prison felt heavier with every passing hour, and time moved like thick water, slow and impossible to escape. Valentine understood clearly that his life was almost over. The sentence had been decided. The date was fixed. February 14th was coming. Yet inside his heart there was no panic. Years earlier, when he chose to marry couples in secret, he had already accepted this possible end. For him, fear was temporary, but love was eternal. On the final night before his execution, he made one simple request. He asked for paper and ink. The guards were surprised, but they allowed it. He did not write to Emperor Claudius II. He did not write to church leaders. He wrote to one person, the jailer's daughter, the young woman who once lived in total darkness and who now could see the world around her. His letter was not long. It did not contain anger or regret. It carried gratitude, faith, and gentle encouragement. He reminded her to stay strong, to remember that light is more powerful than darkness, and that love is never wasted, even when it costs everything. At the bottom of the page, he signed it with 4 quiet words. From your Valentine. He could not imagine that centuries later those same words would appear on millions of cards decorated with hearts and flowers. For him, it was not a slogan. It was a final connection between 2 human souls. The next morning, around the year 269 A.D., soldiers opened his cell. There was no crowd cheering, no public speech, no dramatic scene. Only footsteps, metal armor, and silence. Valentine walked out without resistance. He was executed as a criminal under Roman law, a priest who disobeyed an emperor, a man who protected lovers, a prisoner who prayed for a blind girl. His body was buried quietly, but ideas cannot be buried so easily. Something unexpected began after his death. Instead of disappearing, his name slowly began to rise. At first, only small Christian communities whispered about him. Christianity was still dangerous in Rome, so stories traveled carefully, from family to family, from house to house. They spoke about the brave priest who believed that love was sacred. They repeated the story of the healed girl. They remembered the final letter. Every secret wedding carried a memory of him. Every act of courage in the name of love echoed his example. Then history shifted. In 313 A.D., Emperor Constantine issued the Edict of Milan, making Christianity legal across the Roman Empire. Suddenly, believers no longer needed to hide. Churches were built openly. Sermons were preached in public. And the stories of martyrs, those who had died for their faith, were finally shared without fear. Among those names was Valentine. He was honored as a man who chose faith over safety. But what made him unique was not only his belief in God, it was his defense of love itself. As the early church organized its calendar of saints, Valentine's name was officially recognized. Over time, historians discovered that there were several Christian martyrs named Valentine. One was a priest in Rome. Another was a bishop in Terni. A third may have been a missionary in North Africa. Their stories may have mixed together across generations. But the Valentine most closely connected to February 14th became the symbol of secret marriages, courage, compassion, and sacrifice. His legend contained powerful elements: resistance against unjust law, kindness inside prison walls, a possible miracle, and a farewell letter signed with tenderness. As centuries passed, the Roman Empire itself fell. Emperors were forgotten. Borders changed, but the memory of a man who defended love remained alive. What began as a quiet act inside candlelight weddings slowly transformed into a tradition that crossed continents. February 14th stopped being remembered as a day of execution. It became a day connected with affection, devotion, and heartfelt messages. The transformation was slow and natural. People need symbols. How did a quiet grave near a Roman road turn into a global celebration filled with roses, poems, and billion-dollar businesses? After his execution, Saint Valentine was buried near the Via Flaminia, an important road leading north from Rome. In time, Christians built a small church above the place where they believed his body rested. Pilgrims began visiting, walking long distances to honor the man who chose love over fear. Over the centuries, as was common in medieval Europe, relics believed to belong to him were moved to different churches. Pieces of bone, fragments of remains, sacred objects connected to his memory traveled to places like Ireland, France, and the United Kingdom. Even today, some churches claim to guard these relics. Visitors come not only to pray but to whisper quiet gratitude. Thank you for defending love. Thank you for your courage. Thank you for reminding the world that love is worth sacrifice. But why exactly February 14th? Yes, tradition says it was the day of his execution, and the church marked it as his official feast day. Yet history added another layer. During the Middle Ages, many Europeans believed that birds began choosing their mates in mid-February. People observed nature carefully, and they saw this period as the start of pairing and nest building. The image was powerful. Birds finding partners just as humans searched for connection. Gradually, the idea of Saint Valentine blended with this seasonal symbol of romance. Nature and martyrdom combined into one shared meaning. In the 1300s, the English poet Geoffrey Chaucer strengthened this connection in his poem Parliament of Fowls, where birds gather on Saint Valentine's Day to choose their mates. His poetry helped transform a religious remembrance into a celebration of romantic love. After Chaucer, writers across Europe embraced the theme. Lovers began composing poems and short notes on February 14th. These handwritten messages were called Valentines. They were personal, emotional, and often secret. There were no printed cards in stores, no advertisements, no commercial pressure, just ink, paper, and courage, much like the final letter written from a prison cell centuries earlier. As the Renaissance and later centuries unfolded, the meaning of Valentine's Day continued evolving. In medieval society, marriages were often arranged for political or economic reasons. Public romance was limited. But Valentine's Day created a small window where emotions could be expressed more freely. Young people exchanged poems. Some left small handmade gifts anonymously. The phrase, "to be my Valentine," became a gentle but meaningful confession. In 1415, Charles, Duke of Orléans, imprisoned in England, wrote a love poem to his wife on February 14th, calling her his Valentine. That letter still survives today in the British Library, linking history once again to the image of love written from captivity. By the 1700s, exchanging handwritten valentines became common in England and France. People folded decorated paper carefully and delivered it by hand. The act itself mattered more than the object. But the world was changing. The Industrial Revolution in the 1800s transformed printing, paper production, and communication. What had once been handmade could now be mass-produced. In England and later in the United States, printed Valentine cards began appearing. In America, a businesswoman named Esther Howland saw an opportunity in the 1840s. Inspired by elegant European designs, she started producing decorative Valentine cards with lace, colorful images, and romantic verses. Her idea was simple but powerful. People still wanted to express love, even if they no longer had time to craft detailed letters themselves. Her business grew quickly. Valentine's Day was no longer only about private poetry. It was becoming public and commercial. By the mid-19th century, shops in America and Europe displayed ready-made cards with hearts and Cupid figures. The symbolism expanded. Red hearts represented passion. In a world where love is measured in likes, price tags, and public posts, can we still hear the quiet heartbeat of the man who died for it? As the 20th century accelerated, Valentine's Day transformed into something louder, brighter, and impossible to ignore. It moved from handwritten letters to store windows, from private emotions to public campaigns. Radios played romantic songs. Newspapers printed advertisements telling people how to prove their love. Schools organized Valentine card exchanges. Everywhere there was the same message: buy this, give that, show your love in a visible way. For many, this was exciting. It made expressing feelings easier. Not everyone can write poetry. Not everyone feels confident speaking about emotions. A card, a bouquet, a small box of chocolates became simple tools for saying, "You matter to me." But at the same time, critics began asking uncomfortable questions. Had the meaning changed? Was this still about courage and sacrifice, or had it become a marketing machine? The debate grew, yet the celebration kept expanding. By the late 20th century, Valentine's Day was no longer limited to Europe or North America. In Japan, women traditionally give chocolates to men on February 14th, and 1 month later on White Day, men return gifts. In South Korea, the calendar of love became even more creative, including a day for singles. In Mexico, the holiday celebrates not only romance, but also friendship. In the Philippines, thousands of couples marry together in large ceremonies on that date. Even in countries where the holiday faced restrictions, young people quietly found ways to exchange small signs of affection. Different cultures, different customs, but one shared idea: love deserves expression. And then came the modern era of global spending. In countries like the United States, billions of dollars are spent every year on flowers, jewelry, chocolates, dinners, travel, and even gifts for pets. Businesses plan months ahead. Advertisements promise unforgettable memories. Social media adds another layer. On February 14th, timelines fill with couple photos, surprise proposals, romantic vacations, and carefully arranged gifts. Love becomes visible, documented, and sometimes compared. This creates pressure. People begin to wonder if their celebration is big enough, expensive enough, public enough. Singles may feel excluded. Couples may feel they must perform happiness. The irony is powerful. A day inspired by a quiet act of faith inside a prison cell now often feels loud and competitive. But here is the deeper truth. The commercial layer is real, but it is not the core. Under the advertisements and expectations, something older still lives. Valentine's Day continues because human beings continue to need connection. We want to be seen. We want to be chosen. We want to hear the words, "You are important to me." The form may change. The symbols may evolve. But the desire remains the same as it was in ancient Rome. When we look back to the origin, we do not see diamonds or greeting cards. We see a priest who believed that love should not be controlled by fear. We see secret weddings performed in candlelight. We see a letter written before execution, signed with simple tenderness. That is the foundation. So, is Valentine's Day real love or social pressure? The answer depends on the person. If it becomes a competition, it loses its spirit. If it becomes an opportunity to speak honestly, it regains its heart. Love does not require a price tag. It does not demand a perfect photo. Sometimes it is quiet. Sometimes it is brave. Sometimes it is simply a message sent at the right moment. The world has changed dramatically since the 3rd century. Empires have fallen. Technology has transformed communication. Traditions have grown and adapted. But February 14th still returns every year, asking the same question it asked long ago. Will you choose fear, or will you choose love? The story of Valentine is not really about a holiday. It is about a decision.